Your brother has set a trap for you." The words, barely a whisper, sliced through the morning hum of the executive floor. Amara Lysander stopped dead, her hand hovering over the biometric scanner to her office. She turned slowly, her gaze falling on the man in the gray janitor's uniform. His name tag read, Orion. She didn't recognize him. To her, he was just part of the building's machinery, a pair of hands that kept the marble gleaming. Now, this machine was speaking to her, and the words were an accusation. "What did you just say?" Her voice was cold, sharp, a tool she used to dissect problems, people, and profits with equal precision. Orion's heart hammered against his ribs, but he held her gaze. The words felt like stones in his mouth, a weight he had been carrying since the night before, when the silence of this very floor had been shattered by a single, venomous voice. 12 hours earlier, the only sound had been the low hiss of his buffer. The city lights glittered below like a fallen constellation, and Orion Bell was, as always, invisible. He was thinking about Leora's upcoming school science fair, mentally calculating if he could afford the project materials on his next paycheck when he heard it. The clink of ice in a glass from the executive lounge. And then, a voice. Roland Lysander's. "The disc is my insurance policy," Roland was saying into his phone, his tone dripping with smug confidence. "It has her entire life's work on it, the real formula, the one that actually works. He's wiping the main servers clean as we speak." Orion froze behind a large structural pillar, melting into the shadows. He knew he should move, retreat, unhear what he was hearing, but his feet were rooted to the floor. "Of course she doesn't suspect a thing," Roland scoffed. "She's too busy planning her victory lap. Tomorrow, she'll present the final data to the board. Except the data she's presenting is my little work of art. A masterpiece of disaster." He laughed. "I just flipped a few key markers in the protein sequence. To a layman, it looks identical. To the regulatory board's deep scan software, it'll light up like a Christmas tree. Severe cardiac inflammation, risk of thrombosis. They'll say she knowingly faked the results. That she put lives at risk for profit." A cold dread washed over Orion. He pictured Amara's face from the company reports. Austere, driven, but with an unmistakable passion. She'd dedicated a decade of her life to this cardiac treatment. "The media will crucify her," Roland crowed. "And when the dust settles, who will be there to pick up the pieces? Her loyal, steady brother. The board will have no choice but to appoint me interim CE." Oh, he took a long drink. "As for the disc, once I'm in charge, I'll sell it to you. You get the formula for a fraction of the cost, and I get the satisfaction of watching her empire crumble into dust." She never should have been given the keys, not after what Father said. She never deserved it. The raw hatred in Roland's voice was chilling. This wasn't just business. This was personal. This was revenge, meticulously planned and delivered with a smile. "Don't worry, it's hidden," Roland assured the person on the phone. "Tucked away somewhere so beneath her, she'd never even think to look. It's perfect." The call ended. Orion heard Roland's footsteps approaching and held his breath, making himself smaller, grayer, more invisible than ever before. Roland swept past without a glance, leaving only the scent of expensive cologne and the echo of his treachery in the silent air. Orion stayed in the shadows for a long time, the buffer's handle slick with sweat in his palm. He thought of Leora. He thought of the tuition bill. The right thing to do, the safe thing, was to forget it. But as he looked out at the sprawling city, at the millions of lives encapsulated in those glittering lights, he knew he couldn't. He couldn't let one man's poison infect the hope this company was built on. And so he had waited, all night, for this single moment. Now, in the bright, unforgiving light of morning, Amara Lysander's eyes narrowed, dissecting him. "A trap? What are you talking about? Are you drunk?" "No, ma'am. Last night. I heard him on the phone, in the lounge." Before he could say more, a smooth voice interjected. "Is there a problem here, ma'am?" Penn Gable, Amara's impeccably dressed assistant, appeared at her side, his expression a perfect blend of concern and efficiency. He shot Orion a look of pure venom before turning back to Amara. "This man is making absurd accusations against your brother," Amara said, her tone flat. Penn's face softened with practiced sympathy. He stepped between them, a human shield of loyalty. "Ma'am, Roland had to reprimand this man yesterday for carelessness. I believe he's trying to cause trouble out of spite. Don't worry, I'll have him fired immediately." The lie was so seamless, so utterly believable, that Orion felt the floor drop out from under him. He had never spoken to Roland Lysander in his life. "Fired," Orion stammered. "But I'm telling you the truth. He's going to frame you. The cardiac treatment—" "Enough!" Amara snapped. Her decision was made. She trusted the man who organized her life, not the man who cleaned her floors. She looked at Orion, and for the first time, she truly saw him. Not as a person, but as a problem to be erased. "Penn, handle it. I don't want to see him in this building again." She turned her back on him, pressed her thumb to the scanner, and disappeared into her office without a second glance. The heavy door clicked shut, sealing his fate. Penn Gable smiled, a thin, triumphant curve of his lips. "Security will escort you out," he said, his voice a low hiss. "And if you try to spread these pathetic lies anywhere else, I'll make sure you never work in this city again." Orion stood alone in the hallway, the morning bustle of the executive floor swirling around him like a distant storm. He had tried to stop a catastrophe, and in less than 60 seconds, he had lost everything. The trap Roland had set for his sister was still ticking, and now he was caught in it too. 2 security guards, built like refrigerators in tailored suits, materialized beside him. Their faces were impassive, but their presence was an iron wall. "Sir, you need to come with us," the first one said, his voice polite but unyielding. Orion's protest died in his throat. Arguing was pointless. The decision had been made in the silent, carpeted world of the 40th floor. Down here, on the marble, all that was left was enforcement. He was no longer an employee. He was a problem being removed. They didn't touch him, but they flanked him so closely he could feel the heat from their bodies. The walk through the grand atrium felt like a mile. Heads turned. Whispers followed him like a trail of snakes. He saw faces he recognized. Scientists, lab techs, marketing assistants he'd exchanged pleasant nods with for years. Now they stared with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. He was a spectacle. The invisible man, suddenly, horribly visible. Outside, the city air hit him like a slap. One of the guards handed him a small cardboard box containing the contents of his locker. A worn copy of a paperback, a spare phone charger, and the framed school picture of Leora. The doors to Lysander Genetics hissed shut behind him. Just like that, his life was boxed up and handed to him on a city sidewalk. He stood there for a long moment, the box feeling impossibly heavy in his arms. Horns blared. People rushed past, a river of purpose and direction. Orion felt anchored in place, a rock in the middle of the current. He was jobless, disgraced. He had a daughter to feed, rent due in a week, and a tuition payment that was now an impossible mountain. His first instinct was to run, go to the police, tell them everything. But the scenario played out in his mind with brutal clarity. He could hear the questions now. "So, Mr. Bell, you, a janitor who was just fired for insubordination, are accusing the brother of one of the most powerful CEOs in the country of a massive conspiracy? Do you have any proof? Any recordings? Any other witnesses?" He had nothing. Only his word against the combined power of Roland Lysander and Penn Gable. They had already branded him a liar with a grudge. He'd be dismissed as a crank, a disgruntled employee seeking revenge. They had planned this perfectly. He took the subway home, the metallic screech of the wheels echoing the chaos in his head. His apartment was small, on the 4th floor of a walk-up, but it was their sanctuary. The first thing he saw when he walked in was the pile of mail on the kitchen table. On top was a pale yellow envelope from Leora's school, the tuition reminder. Beside it, a red-bordered notice from the electric company. He felt a wave of nausea. He sank onto a kitchen chair, the cardboard box on the floor beside him. The silence of the apartment was deafening. This was the consequence of doing the right thing. This was his reward. For a moment, he let a wave of bitter regret wash over him. He should have kept his head down. He should have walked away. But then he pictured Roland's smug, triumphant face. He heard the venom in his voice as he plotted his sister's downfall. He thought about the people, the real people with failing hearts, who were counting on that medication. And the regret curdled into something else. Anger, cold, hard, and clarifying. They thought they had erased him. They thought a fired janitor was no threat. But they had made a critical mistake. They had underestimated what a man with nothing left to lose would do. And they had forgotten one important thing. Orion Bell knew that building better than they did. He knew the service corridors that weren't on the public blueprints. He knew which security cameras had blind spots. He knew the overnight maintenance schedules, the dumpster pickup times, the precise moment a shift change left the loading dock unattended for 3 minutes. He knew the building's secrets because he was one of them. His mind replayed Roland's words. It's hidden somewhere so beneath her, she'd never even think to look. Orion's gaze drifted around his small apartment. It was the definition of beneath someone like Amara Lysander. What else was beneath her? The boiler room? The sub-level storage? The recycling center in the basement? Roland wasn't just talking about a physical location. He was talking about a concept. He'd hidden the disc in a place of insignificance, a place only the invisible people would ever see. The front door clicked open, and Leora bounced in, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "Dad, you're home early!" Orion forced a smile, pushing the darkness away. "Hey, Pumpkin, they gave me the afternoon off." She eyed him with the unnerving perception of a quiet child. "Are you okay? You look sad." "Just tired, sweetie. Long night." He knelt and helped her with her backpack. "How was school?" "It was good. We learned about constellations. Did you know my name is a star?" "I did," he said, his voice thick. "You're the brightest one in my sky." She beamed and handed him a drawing. It was a detailed sketch of the Lysander Genetics building, but with a twist. She had drawn a maze of tunnels and secret passages underneath it, with a stick figure that looked like him holding a flashlight in the middle. At the center of the maze, she had drawn a glowing yellow circle. "It's a treasure map," she explained. "You're looking for the hidden gold." Orion stared at the drawing, a chill running down his spine. From the mouths of babes. He wasn't looking for gold. He was looking for a disc. A small, round piece of plastic that held the truth. And his daughter had just shown him the way. He had to go back. Not as an employee, not as a victim. He had to go back as a ghost, and he had to hunt. "It's a great map, Leora," he said, his voice steady now, his resolve hardening into steel. "I think I know exactly where to start looking." The news broke on a Tuesday. Orion was nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee, watching the morning news on a small, flickering television. He had been avoiding it, but the name Lysander was unavoidable. It was everywhere. A stern-faced reporter stood in front of the gleaming tower where he used to work. Sources inside the regulatory agency confirmed that the data submitted for Lysander Genetics' new cardiac treatment, corazonin, showed signs of deliberate manipulation. The potential for patient harm is catastrophic, leading to a full federal investigation. Orion's stomach tightened. It was happening, exactly as Roland had planned. The screen cut to live footage. A crowd of reporters swarmed the entrance of a luxury apartment building. And then, he saw her. Amara Lysander, flanked by 2 stone-faced agents, was being led out to a black car. The cameras flashed like a violent electrical storm. Her face was pale, stripped of its usual severe composure. For a fraction of a second, he saw raw, stunned disbelief an expression that said, "This cannot be happening." Then the mask slammed back down, her jaw set, her eyes became chips of ice. She held her head high as they guided her into the car, a queen being led to the gallows. He felt a bitter taste in his mouth. He was right, and it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a sickness. A woman was on her way to prison, her life's work in ashes, all because he was just a janitor nobody would listen to. A sharp, insistent knock on the door jolted him. He opened it to find a man in a utility worker's uniform, holding a clipboard. "Orion Bell?" "Yes." "Sorry, sir. We're here to suspend service. Account's 90 days past due." Orion's blood ran cold. "No, wait. I can pay it. I need another day. My paycheck." The lie felt pathetic even as he said it. There was no paycheck coming. The man's expression was weary, practiced. He'd heard it all before. "I'm sorry, sir. My work order is final." Before Orion could protest further, the lights in his apartment flickered once, twice, and died. The hum of the refrigerator ceased. The reporter's face on the television vanished into a black screen. A profound, suffocating silence filled the room. The man from the electric company gave a short, apologetic nod and left. Orion stood in the dim, gray light of the apartment, the silence pressing in on him. He was literally powerless. He had been cut off, plunged into the dark while that tower, still blazed with stolen light. This was it. Rock bottom. He walked over to the kitchen table. Leora's drawing of the treasure map lay next to the now useless tuition reminder. He picked it up. "You're looking for the hidden gold." He wasn't a hero. He was a desperate father in a dark apartment. But in that moment, desperation felt a lot like courage. He couldn't fight them in their world of lawyers and boardrooms, but he could fight them in his, the world of the unseen, the world beneath. He spent the rest of the day planning, the darkness of the apartment forcing a sharp, singular focus. He pulled out a crumpled schematic of the building's HVAC system he'd once saved from the trash, a relic from a long-forgotten repair. He spread it on the floor, using the faint light from the window to trace the lines with his finger. Leora's map lay beside it. The main server room was on the 38th floor, a fortress of technology. But its cooling systems, its lifeblood, ran through the entire building, connected by a network of maintenance shafts and service tunnels. The entrance to that network, the main hub, was in the sub-basement, sub-level 3, a place of humming generators and forgotten storage cages, a place so far beneath her that Amara Lysander probably didn't even know it existed. He began to assemble his tools, not with the stealth of a thief, but with the practicality of a janitor. A headlamp, a multi-tool with a pry bar attachment, a roll of duct tape, and a pair of thick, rubber-soled work boots for silence. He also grabbed a pair of new, clean leather work gloves from their plastic packaging, the kind used for handling chemicals. If he found the disc, he couldn't leave a trace. Every detail mattered. The phone rang, its shrill cry unnaturally loud in the silent apartment. He checked the caller ID. Leora's school. He let it ring, his jaw tight. He couldn't answer. He couldn't make promises he couldn't keep. The ringing finally stopped, leaving a heavy accusation in its wake. He had to go tonight. The news cycle was a frenzy. The building would be swarming with investigators during the day, but at night it would fall back into its routine. A new cleaning crew, new guards. They wouldn't be looking for him. They wouldn't be looking for a ghost. When Leora came home, he had lit a few candles, turning their predicament into a game. "It's a camp-out," he announced, forcing a cheerfulness that felt like swallowing glass. They ate sandwiches for dinner, and he read to her by candlelight, her small head resting on his lap. Her trust in him was a physical weight, a constant reminder of what was at stake. Later, he tucked her into bed. She was already half asleep. "Love you, Dad," she mumbled. "I love you more, Pumpkin," he whispered, his throat tight. "I'll be back before you wake up." He stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching her sleep in the flickering candlelight. She was his entire world, and he was walking into the heart of the fire for her. He slipped out of the apartment, a small worn backpack over his shoulder. From the street he could see it. The Lysander Genetics Tower, a shard of impossible light against the night sky, a symbol of power, of everything he was not. Roland was in there. Or if not him, his crime was. The lie was embedded in the building's digital heart. They had taken his job, his power, his dignity, but they couldn't take his knowledge. Tonight, he would use it. He would walk back into that building, not as a janitor, but as an instrument of truth, and he would not leave until he had found it. The hunt had begun. The air outside the Lysander Tower was cold and clean, carrying the sterile scent of the city asleep. Orion moved through the shadows of the service alley, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. The building loomed over him, a silent, glittering beast. He was a flea attempting to crawl back onto a lion. His target was the loading bay. At 2:45 a.m., the commercial waste management truck arrived. For 3 minutes, while the massive compactor bins were being swapped, the bay's magnetic lock on the secondary personnel door was disengaged for the sanitation crew. It was a tiny flaw in an otherwise perfect system, a detail only a janitor would know. He watched from behind a dumpster as the truck lumbered into the bay. The hiss of hydraulics filled the air. This was it. He pulled his watch cap lower and moved, not running, but walking with the steady, unremarkable pace of someone who belonged there. He reached the steel door, swiped a dummy card he'd kept, not to open it, but to mimic the motion, and pulled. The heavy door opened with a soft click. He slipped inside, the door swinging shut behind him, plunging him into the concrete guts of the building. He was in. The air in the sub-basement tasted different. A mix of cool, recycled air, ozone from the giant transformers, and the faint, chemical tang of industrial cleaners. It was the smell of his old life. He pulled the headlamp over his cap, its beam cutting a sharp white tunnel through the darkness. He moved quickly, his rubber-soled boots making no sound on the dusty floor. He bypassed the main corridors, instead ducking into a narrow maintenance passage that ran alongside the primary electrical conduits. This was his world now, a maze of pipes, wires, and humming machinery. His first stop was the old records archive in sub-level 3. Roland's clue haunted him, somewhere so beneath her. A room full of forgotten paper files from a company that had gone fully digital a decade ago felt like the definition of beneath. The room was sealed with a simple padlock. His multi-tool made short work of it. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of decaying paper. Rows of metal shelves stretched into the darkness, sagging under the weight of thousands of forgotten files. He swept his light across the room. It was a graveyard of old ideas and obsolete projects. He spent 20 minutes moving through the aisles, checking inside boxes, behind loose shelves, tapping panels for hidden compartments. Nothing. The only thing he found was dust and dead spiders. It was a dead end. As he was about to leave, he heard it. The soft squeak of a guard's shoes on the main corridor floor, followed by the faint crackle of a radio. Orion killed his light, his heart leaping into his throat. He ducked behind a towering shelf, pressing himself into the darkness, trying to control his breathing. The beam of a flashlight swept across the padlocked door. Orion could see it slice through the cracks in the metal. The footsteps paused. Orion held his breath, every muscle screaming. Did he hear me? Did I leave a mark? After an eternity, the footsteps moved on, their squeak fading down the hall. He let out a slow, shuddering breath. That was too close. The archive was a bust, and he was wasting time. He had to rethink. Roland was arrogant. He wouldn't hide his prize in a place of decay. He'd hide it somewhere connected to his power, his crime. The server room. He couldn't get into the server room itself. It was a biometric fortress, but the cooling tunnels beneath it, that was a different story. He made his way to the maintenance hub for the 38th floor's climate control, a small, unmarked room at the end of a service corridor. The door had a simple electronic keypad, but he knew its flaw. The system reset every night at 3:15 a.m., and for 30 seconds the default maintenance code, 0000, would work. He checked his watch. 3:14. He waited. The moment his watch flipped, he punched in the code. A green light blinked. The lock clicked. He slipped inside and closed the door behind him. He was in a cramped space filled with humming fans and ductwork. A large panel on the floor led to the server cooling tunnels. He pried it open and lowered himself into the darkness below. The air was frigid, the noise of the fans a constant roar. It was a tight crawl space, a web of fiber optic cables and coolant pipes. He crawled forward, his headlamp beam bouncing off the metallic surfaces. He was directly beneath the digital heart of the company. He began his search, looking for anything out of place. A loose panel, a fresh scratch mark, anything. 10 minutes turned into 20. He was starting to feel a familiar despair creep in when his light caught something. Tucked behind a thick bundle of cables, on a small ledge, was the stub of a cigar. It wasn't just any cigar. It was a brand with a gold and crimson band, the same kind he'd seen Roland Lysander smoking in the executive garage. No guard, no maintenance worker could afford these. Roland had been here. Orion's pulse quickened. He focused his beam on the wall behind the ledge. It looked like a solid sheet of metal, but as he ran his fingers over it, he felt a faint seam. It was a non-essential access panel, one that hadn't been on the schematic. He used the pry bar on his multi-tool, inserting it into the seam and leveraging it carefully. The panel popped open with a soft metallic groan. Before reaching inside, he stopped. He pulled the clean leather work gloves from his backpack and carefully put them on. He took a deep breath. Inside the dark cavity was a small, lead-lined container, an old sample box from the labs. It was heavy, dense, and utterly out of place. It was the perfect hiding spot, shielded from electronic detection, hidden in a place of noise and function that no executive would ever dare to enter. It was brilliant. It was arrogant. It was Roland. With his gloved hands, he lifted the box out. He opened the latch. Inside, nestled in soft black foam, was a single silver disc. He had it. A wave of dizzying relief and terror washed over him. He held the truth in his hands. He carefully placed the box back, closed the panel, and was about to retreat when he heard voices from the room above him. The maintenance hub. "I'm telling you, he sounded spooked on the phone." The voice was sharp, familiar. It was Penn Gable. "Roland said to double-check. Make sure everything is secure down here after the news broke. He's getting paranoid." Orion froze, his blood turning to ice. He was trapped in the narrow tunnel, holding the one piece of evidence that could destroy them, and they were standing right on top of him. Orion's entire world shrank to the narrow, frigid space of the cooling tunnel. Penn Gable's voice was directly above him, sharp and laced with anxiety. "Just check the main panel logs. Roland wants confirmation that the system is clean. No flags, no errors since the upload." A second voice, deeper and calmer, replied, "Logs are clean. Everything looks normal." Orion recognized the voice of Mr. Graves, the head of night security, a man who moved with the quiet menace of a wolf. This was bad. Graves wasn't just a guard. He was Roland's loyal shadow. "Normal isn't good enough," Penn snapped. "He's worried about loose ends. After they arrested her, he's convinced there are spies everywhere." "The only loose end was that janitor," Graves said, his voice a low rumble. "And you took care of him." "Firing him wasn't enough," Penn muttered, more to himself than to Graves. "Men with a grudge are unpredictable. He should have been handled more permanently." A chill, colder than the tunnel's air, spiderwebbed down Orion's spine. These weren't just corporate criminals. They were talking about him, and their definition of handling the problem was terrifyingly clear. He clutched the lead-lined box to his chest. his knuckles white inside the leather gloves. This disc wasn't just proof. It was his death warrant if he was found with it. A powerful beam of light sliced through the floor grate just inches from Orion's face, forcing him to squeeze his eyes shut. "Everything down here seems secure," Graves reported. "Just dust and wires." "Fine," Penn said, his voice tight with frustration. "Let's go. I want to shred the logs from the sub-level archives before the day shift gets here. There's no reason for anyone to know we were ever in that room." Orion heard their footsteps move away from the panel. The door to the maintenance hub clicked shut. He waited, his body rigid, counting out a full 5 minutes in the roaring darkness. He didn't dare breathe, convinced it was a trap. But the silence held. They were gone. He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. His original escape route was compromised. They were actively wiping their trail, which meant they could be anywhere. He had to find another way out, and fast. He crawled backward, the lead box tucked securely inside his jacket. Instead of climbing back up, he pushed deeper into the network, following a bundle of coolant pipes that he knew led to the building's primary vertical utility shaft. It was a risky move. The shaft connected every floor, but it was also a potential trap, with access points all the way down. He found the access hatch, a small circular panel sealed with 4 bolts. His multi-tool worked silently in the dark, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He slipped into the shaft, a cavernous dark throat that plunged 40 stories. A steel maintenance ladder was bolted to the wall. He began to climb down, his world nothing but the next rung, the echo of his own breathing, and the precious, heavy weight in his jacket. He descended past the floors of sleeping offices, a ghost in the building's spine. He finally stopped at a service junction on the 3rd floor, which he knew connected to a ventilation duct for the ground floor kitchens. It was a filthy, greasy route, but it was his only option. He squeezed through another panel and into the ductwork, the smell of old grease and stale food overwhelming him. He crawled on his hands and knees, the metal groaning under his weight, until he saw it, a faint gray light ahead, a ventilation grate. He pushed against it. It was stiff with rust and grime, but it gave way, opening into a deserted alley behind the tower. He tumbled out, landing on a pile of discarded cardboard, the cool pre-dawn air hitting his face. He was out. He was free. He scrambled to his feet, pulling his cap down, and melted into the shadows of the alley, not stopping until he was 3 blocks away, his lungs burning. The city was beginning to stir. Streetlights still glowed, but the sky was softening from black to a deep, bruised purple. Orion leaned against a cold brick wall, pulling the box from his jacket. He opened it. The silver disc gleamed in the faint light. He had it. He had the truth. But the relief was fleeting, replaced by a new, heavier dread. What now? He couldn't go to the police. Men like Graves and Penn, backed by Roland's money, could make evidence disappear. They could make him disappear. He pictured Leora, alone. The risk was too great. He needed a warrior, someone who fought for people like him. He racked his brain, trying to pull a memory from the fog of exhaustion. A news story from a few years ago. A corporate whistleblower, a low-level accountant, was being crushed by a massive pharmaceutical company. A lawyer had taken his case, a public defender who had refused to back down. The media had called her a bulldog. Her name, it was sharp, different. Sharma, Naya Sharma. Orion looked down at the disc in his gloved hands, then up at the Lysander Tower, still a proud silhouette against the rising sun. They thought they had all the power. They had the money, the lawyers, the police in their pocket. But he had the truth. It wasn't enough to possess it. He had to get it into the right hands. His next move was clear. He wasn't going home. He wasn't going to the police. He was going to find Naya Sharma. He slipped the disc back into its box and zipped it into his jacket. A new hunt was beginning, not through the tunnels of a building, but through the labyrinth of the law. And he was still the only one who knew the way. Dawn bled into a harsh gray morning. Orion, running on pure adrenaline, found a 24-hour laundromat with a single grimy computer kiosk in the corner. Every dollar he fed into the slot felt like a piece of his daughter's future slipping away. The keyboard was sticky, the monitor buzzed, but it worked. He typed Nia Sharma, lawyer, into the search bar. The results came back instantly. She was no longer a public defender. 5 years ago, after her landmark victory against a pharmaceutical giant, she'd opened her own small firm. The website was simple, no frills. Sharma and Associates, Justice for the Voiceless. The address was on the other side of the city, in a neighborhood of brick warehouses and struggling storefronts, a world away from the glass peaks of the financial district. He spent his last few dollars on a bus ticket, the lid-lined box a cold weight against his chest. He felt the stares of the other passengers. With his grimy clothes and the haunted look in his eyes, he knew he looked like a man on the edge. He was. Nia Sharma's office was on the second floor of an old building, above a bail bondsman. The waiting room was cramped, filled with mismatched chairs and people whose faces carried the same weary desperation he felt. The paralegal behind a plexiglass shield looked at him with profound skepticism. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Orion said, his voice hoarse. "But it's about Amara Lysander. It's urgent." The man rolled his eyes. "You and half the city. Take a seat. Miss Sharma is busy." Orion sat for 2 hours, watching people come and go, his paranoia growing with every passing minute. He felt exposed, hunted. Finally, the paralegal sighed with exasperation. "She has 5 minutes, that's it." He was led into a small, cluttered office. Books and files were stacked in precarious towers. At the center of the organized chaos sat Nia Sharma. She was younger than he expected, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through him. She didn't stand up. "You have 5 minutes," she said, her voice crisp. "Start talking." Orion's carefully rehearsed speech evaporated. He just told her the truth, the words tumbling out in a raw, frantic rush. The late-night shift, the phone call, Roland's exact words, the falsified data, the disk. He finished by explaining how he was fired, how Penn Gable had lied. Nia listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. When he was done, a heavy silence filled the room. "Let me get this straight," she said, her tone cutting. "You, a janitor who was conveniently fired for insubordination, are claiming the real villain is Roland Lysander, not the sister who the FBI has already arrested. Your story hinges on a conversation you overheard while trespassing was not part of your duties. I was just doing my job. And your proof," she continued, ignoring him, "is a disk. A disk you obtained by breaking into the company's headquarters. Do you have any idea how many laws you broke? Everything you just described is inadmissible in court. It's fruit of the poisonous tree. Your testimony is hearsay from a disgruntled employee. Your evidence is tainted. As a case, this is a ghost. It doesn't exist." Orion felt the hope drain out of him. "So that's it? He gets away with it?" "That's the law," Nia said flatly. She started to gather some papers, a clear dismissal. "He said he was getting what he was owed," Orion said, his voice quiet but intense. "He said his father never should have given her the keys. This wasn't just about money. It was about hate." He leaned forward, his hands flat on her desk. "I have a daughter. Her name is Leora. I lost my job, my power was cut off yesterday, and I will probably lose my apartment next. I did all of this because I couldn't stand by and let him do that to his own sister and to all the people who needed that medication." Nia paused, her hand hovering over a file. Orion pushed forward. "I wore gloves, clean gloves, straight out of the package. My fingerprints aren't on that disc or the box it's in. His might be." He slid the lead-lined box across the desk. "I haven't opened this on a computer. I haven't touched the disc itself. I knew it could be traced." Nia stared at the box, then back at him. For the first time, A flicker of something other than dismissal crossed her face. He wasn't just a crank. He had been smart. She tapped a long, unpainted nail on her desk, thinking. Fingerprints are circumstantial. It proves he might have touched a box. It doesn't prove when or why. It doesn't disprove that Amara manipulated the data. She leaned back, her eyes narrowing. Your story is a skeleton, Mr. Bell. I can't fight with a skeleton. I need muscle. I need a nerve ending. What do you mean? You said he was on the phone with a rival company. You heard him say OmniGen. A name is a start, but it's not enough. Find me a link. One solid, verifiable piece of evidence that connects Roland Lysander to OmniGen. Not a whisper, not a theory. A bank transfer, a signed document, a travel itinerary showing him meeting with their executives. Something real, something admissible, something that proves they were in contact before Amara's arrest. She stood up, the meeting over. You're a ghost, Mr. Bell. Your story is a ghost. Bring me something I can touch, and maybe I'll believe in you. He was back on the street, the box once again in his possession. He wasn't defeated. He was armed. He had a mission. It was an impossible one. How could a broke, jobless janitor find a secret link between a billionaire and a rival corporation? He walked the long miles home, his mind racing. Leora was with their neighbor, Mrs. Gable, a kind woman who was starting to look at him with worried eyes. He thanked her, promising to have the power back on soon. Another lie that tasted like ash. That night, in the dark apartment, he lit a candle and held the disc in his gloved hands. He was closer than he'd ever been, yet impossibly far. He had a potential ally, but she had demanded a miracle. He had to go hunting again, not in the shadows of a building, but in the digital shadows where men like Roland Lysander hid their sins. And he had to do it with no money, no resources, and the wolves closing in. The candle in Orion's apartment had burned down to a waxy puddle. Leora was asleep in her room, a small, still form in the darkness. Outside, the city hummed with a life he was no longer a part of. He sat at the kitchen table, the lead-lined box in front of him, Nia Sharma's challenge echoing in his head. Bring me something I can touch. How could he find a link between Roland Lysander and OmniGen? He had no computer, no access, no power. The thought was a blank wall. He felt a familiar despair begin to creep in, the kind that whispered it was all hopeless, that he should just focus on finding a new menial job and forget this ever happened. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the distant, glittering spire of the Lysander Tower. He had to stop thinking like a victim. He had to think like a janitor. What did powerful men like Roland discard? What did they consider beneath them? Their secrets weren't just on servers. They were in the smudges they left behind, the things they threw away. Trash. The idea was disgusting, a long shot, but it was the only one he had. Secrets ended up in the trash. And he was an expert in trash. He spent the next day watching the Lysander Tower from a coffee shop across the street, nursing a single cup for hours until the owner started giving him hard looks. He wasn't watching the front door. He was watching the service alley. He memorized the new guards' routines, the timing of the delivery trucks, the movements of the new cleaning crew. They were sloppy. They left the secondary gate to the disposal area unlocked for minutes at a time. That was his window. His phone buzzed. It was Leora's principal. Her voice was stripped of its usual warmth. Mr. Bell, I'm calling about Leora's tuition. The board has reviewed your account. If the balance isn't paid by Friday, we'll have to remove her from our enrollment list. I'm very sorry. Friday. He had 2 days. 2 days to find a miracle in a pile of garbage. The call ended, and the weight of the world pressed down on him. The deadline wasn't just for Amara anymore. It was for Leora. That night he put on a dark hoodie and his old work boots. He moved through the back alleys of the city, a ghost on a desperate mission. The gate was unlocked, just as he'd observed. He slipped into the disposal area, his heart pounding. The air was sour with the smell of refuse. Against the back wall were a dozen large, sealed bins. One was marked with a red tag. 40th floor, executive, incinerate only. Roland's trash. He pried the lock with his multi-tool. Inside were dozens of black bags. He worked quickly, using a small penlight, his gloved hands tearing through the waste. It was a humiliating, soul-crushing task. He sifted through shredded documents, half-eaten gourmet salads, empty bottles of expensive water. It was a sea of meaningless, shredded confetti. An hour passed. It was hopeless. He was about to give up when his fingers brushed against a small, stiff piece of cardstock. It hadn't been shredded. He pulled it out. It was a receipt from an obscenely expensive restaurant, the Gilded Cage. The date was from 2 weeks ago, long before Amara's arrest. The bill was for 2 people, and the signature at the bottom was Roland Lysanders. Interesting, but it proved nothing. He kept digging. His fingers closed around another small, flimsy piece of paper. He almost tossed it aside, but something made him look closer. It was a valet parking stub from the Gilded Cage, for the same date as the receipt. His breath caught. There were 2 car descriptions on the stub. The first was a black Aston Martin, Roland's car. He'd seen him drive it. The second was a generic black Lincoln, the preferred vehicle of corporate car services. Beside the second entry, a claim number was circled, and next to it, scrawled in the hasty handwriting of a valet, was a name and a note. M. Thorne, Omni-Gen. Orion stared at the stub, his heart hammering. Marcus Thorne. He remembered the name from the news. He was Omni-Gen's ruthless chief of acquisitions. This was it. This was the nerve ending. This flimsy piece of paper put Roland Lysander in a private dinner meeting with a top executive from the rival company that stood to gain everything from Amara's fall. It was concrete. It was admissible. It was the key. A surge of triumph, pure and fierce, shot through him. He carefully folded the stub and the receipt and put them in his wallet. He had done it. He was just closing the bin when a loud metallic clang echoed through the alley. The main service gate swung open. A security guard's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, sweeping across the bins, heading directly for him. "Hey, who's back there?" a voice shouted. Orion flattened himself behind the bin, his mind racing. There was no way out. The gate was the only exit. He was trapped. He'd found the truth, only to be caught and buried with it. The flashlight beam pinned Orion like an insect. "I said, who's back there? Show me your hands, now!" Orion's mind screamed run, but his body knew better. Running made him a thief. He slowly straightened up, raising his hands, making sure to keep the precious valet stub clenched tight in his fist. He squinted into the blinding light, forcing his expression into one of weary annoyance, a look he'd perfected over years of dealing with entitled executives. "Hey, take it easy," he said, his voice raspy. He held up a half-eaten, discarded sandwich he'd seen in the top of the bag. "The new crew tossed my lunch. My supervisor said I could grab it if I was quick. Didn't think I'd need an invitation." The guard, a young guy with a nervous energy, cautiously approached. "Nobody's allowed in the disposal area after midnight. You know that. Let me see your ID." This was the moment. Orion knew his keycard was deactivated, but his photo ID was still in his wallet. He slowly reached for it, his movements deliberate. Yeah, I know. Here." The guard took the ID, his flashlight beam moving from Orion's face to the plastic card. "Orion Bell," he read, then spoke into the radio on his shoulder. "Dispatch, I've got a Mr. Bell here in the service alley. Can you confirm he's on the night shift roster?" Orion's blood ran cold. He had seconds. A voice crackled back over the radio, tinny and distant. "Negative. Orion Boulevard termination filed 3 days ago. Subject is not authorized on premises. Apprehend and await instructions." The guard's eyes snapped up, widening with alarm. His hand went to the baton on his belt. "You're not supposed to be here. On the ground. Now!" Orion didn't wait for the order to be repeated. In one fluid motion, He shoved the massive wheeled incinerator bin with all his might. It wasn't aimed at the guard, but beside him. The heavy container careened across the slick pavement, slamming into a stack of metal drums with a deafening crash. The guard instinctively flinched, turning toward the sound. That was all the opening Orion needed. He sprinted, not back through the gate, but deeper into the labyrinth of alleys behind the tower. He heard the guard shouting behind him, the sound of his pursuit clumsy and loud. Orion ran with the desperation of a hunted animal. He knew these alleys. He knew which fences had holes, which dumpsters could be used for a boost over a wall. He scrambled over a chain-link fence, his hands raw, and dropped into the loading dock of the building next door. He didn't stop. He ran until the shouts faded, until the only sound was the frantic rasp of his own breathing and the pounding of his heart. He finally collapsed in the doorway of a closed butcher shop miles away, his body shaking with adrenaline. He was safe, for now, but he knew his name and face were now officially linked to a security breach at Lysander Tower. They weren't just watching for a ghost anymore. They were hunting Orion Bell. He couldn't go home. Leora. The thought of her waking up alone was a physical pain. He'd have to call Mrs. Gable, make up a story about a family emergency, and pray she'd keep Leora for another night. First, he had to get the evidence to Naya. Her office was out of the question. It would be the first place they'd look if they were smart. He found a payphone, its grimy receiver cool against his ear, and dialed her office number, feeding in his last few coins. He got her voicemail. "It's me," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I have it. The muscle. It turns out the Gilded Cage has a ghost. My cover is blown. I can't come to your office. Be at the Central Library, 3rd floor, History section in 1 hour. Come alone." He hung up before he could second-guess himself. An hour later, he was sitting in the quiet, dusty aisles of the History section, his senses on high alert. He watched as Nia Sharma walked in, her trench coat swirling around her. She looked calm, but her eyes scanned the room with a sharp, assessing gaze. She saw him and walked toward a shelf of Civil War books. "You're drawing a lot of heat, Mr. Bell," she murmured, not looking at him, her fingers tracing the spines of the books. "I got a call this morning from a colleague at the DA's office. They're circulating your name in connection with a break-in. They're painting you as an unstable, vengeful ex-employee." "It was them," Orion whispered back. "They know I was there." "Did you get it?" "Yes." He pulled a thick, hollowed-out book from the shelf. The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. He opened it. Inside, he had placed the lead-lined box, the valet stub, and the restaurant receipt. Naya took the book. Her fingers, nimble and precise, retrieved the items. She looked at the valet stub. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. "Monsieur Thorne, Omni Gen." She read softly. "Well, hello, Mr. Thorne." She looked at Orion, her eyes blazing with a new fire. "This is it. This is the crowbar I needed to pry the whole thing open." She put the stub and receipt in her pocket and held the lead box. "You've done more than enough. You've been incredibly brave. Now, you need to disappear." "What about my daughter?" The question was a raw ache. "Where is she?" "With a neighbor." "Good. Leave her there for now. Don't call. Don't go back to your apartment. They will be watching it. You are a material witness in what is about to become a very, very big case. You're also their #1 target. I'm going to war, Mr. Bell. That makes you a soldier behind enemy lines. I need you to stay alive." She turned to leave. "I'll be in touch through a third party when it's safe. Don't trust anyone." He watched her walk away, the hollowed-out book still in his hands. He had given her the weapons. He had handed over his only leverage, his only hope. He was now officially a fugitive, hunted by a powerful corporation and wanted by the police. He couldn't go home. He couldn't see his daughter. He was alone, with nothing but the clothes on his back and the word of a lawyer he'd met for 5 minutes. The trap had sprung, and he was on the run. The war began not with a bang, but with the quiet filing of a single legal document. In her small, cluttered office, Naya Sharma worked through the night, fueled by coffee and a cold, righteous fury. She didn't go to the press. She didn't leak the disc. She did something far more precise. She filed an emergency motion for a new bail hearing for Amara Lysander, citing credible, time-stamped, exculpatory evidence pointing to an alternative perpetrator with clear motive. As an exhibit, she attached a high-resolution scan of the valet stub. The effect was like dropping a single drop of acid onto a web of lies. Roland Lysander saw the court filing on his tablet while eating breakfast. He choked on his coffee, his face turning a blotchy red. He immediately called Pennsylvania. "A valet stub! How in the hell did he find a valet stub?" he roared into the phone. "I thought you told me the trash was incinerated." "It was scheduled to be," Penn stammered, his usual composure shattered. "The manifest was signed." "Find him, Penn!" Roland screamed, his voice a low, dangerous hiss. "Find that janitor and find out what else he has. I don't care what it costs or what you have to do. Erase him. Erase this entire problem." The hunt for Orion intensified. His face was now on an internal security memo circulated to every private security firm in the city, labeled as a person of interest in a corporate espionage case. There was a quiet, 5-figure reward for information on his whereabouts. He was no longer just a fugitive. He was a commodity. Orion knew none of this. His world had shrunk to the size of survival. He spent his days in the anonymous crowds of the city, his nights in the relative safety of a homeless shelter where no one asked for a name. He was gaunt, his face covered in a rough stubble, his eyes constantly scanning, searching for danger. Every siren made him flinch. Every person who looked at him for a second too long sent a jolt of panic through his system. He kept tabs on the world through the televisions in electronic store windows. He saw the news reports, pundits debating the mysterious new evidence in the Lysander case. He saw Naya, a warrior in a sharp suit, fielding questions on the courthouse steps, her answers deflecting and confident. He felt a fragile sliver of hope. The day of the bail hearing, he stood at the back of a crowded bus station, watching the events unfold on a large overhead screen. He saw Amara, looking thin and weary in a prison-issue jumpsuit, but her eyes held a new, watchful intensity. He saw Roland, sitting in the gallery behind the prosecutors, the picture of a concerned brother. The prosecutor mocked the evidence. "Your Honor, this is a desperate Hail Mary. A parking stub? The defense is attempting to create a fantasy, a conspiracy theory, to distract from the mountain of digital evidence against Ms. Lysander." But Nia was ready. "It's not a fantasy, Your Honor. It's a fact. A fact that Roland Lysander had a clandestine dinner with the head of acquisitions for OmniGen, our chief competitor, a meeting he failed to disclose to his own company, to the board, and to this investigation. It establishes motive. And if the prosecution's case is so strong, why are they so afraid of a simple piece of paper?" On the screen, the camera zoomed in on Amara's face. As Nia spoke, Orion could see the shift, the flicker of doubt, the dawning horror. Her eyes darted to her brother in the gallery. For the first time, she wasn't seeing her loyal younger sibling. She was seeing a stranger. The janitor's warning, the one she had dismissed with such cold arrogance, came crashing back into her mind with the force of a physical blow. "Your brother has set a trap for you." She finally, truly, believed him. The judge, a stern, no-nonsense woman, listened to the arguments, her expression unreadable. Finally, she rendered her decision. While the evidence against Ms. Lysander remained significant, this new information raises serious questions about the integrity and completeness of the initial investigation. The court cannot, in good conscience, ignore a documented, undisclosed meeting between the primary beneficiary of Ms. Lysander's conviction and a corporate rival. She banged her gavel. "Bail is granted. $10 million secured bond. Ms. Lysander will be confined to her residence and fitted with a GPS ankle monitor until trial." The courtroom exploded. Roland shot to his feet, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. Amara simply closed her eyes, a single silent tear tracing a path down her cheek. In the bus station, Orion leaned his head against the cool tile wall, a wave of relief so intense it made him dizzy. He had done it. He had rescued her. Not with force, but with the truth. He had unlocked her cage with a flimsy piece of paper he'd pulled from the trash. That evening, Amara stood in the center of her vast, silent penthouse. The ankle monitor was a cold, heavy weight, a constant reminder that she was a prisoner in her own home. The relief of being out of her cell was quickly being replaced by the terrifying reality of her situation. She was out, but Roland was still out there, more dangerous than ever. Her private tablet chimed. A message from an encrypted app she'd never used before. It was from Naya. They know he was looking for something. They don't know he found the disk. That is our only advantage. Roland's people are hunting him, and they are not playing by the rules. We have to find him before they do. The message ended with a single, chilling line. He rescued you. Now, we have to save him. Amara walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city that had once been her kingdom. Her entire life, her freedom, her future, now depended on the survival of the invisible man she had so casually thrown away. Amara Lysander, the prisoner in the penthouse, became a general in a war she could only see through a screen. Confined by the cold weight of the GPS monitor on her ankle, she repurposed her brilliant, strategic mind from corporate conquest to clandestine survival. Her communication with Nia was a flurry of encrypted texts and coded messages, a digital battle plan drawn up in the face of an encroaching army. He's arrogant, Amara typed, her fingers flying across the tablet, and sentimental in a twisted way. He's always been obsessed with Father's legacy, specifically the private study on the 39th floor. It's been sealed since his death. A psychological trigger. Nia messaged back instantly. I like it. How do we use it? I'll have my civil lawyer file a motion to retrieve personal effects from it, Amara planned. Roland monitors all my legal activity. He'll see it. He won't be able to resist going there himself to see what I could possibly want. He'll think I'm looking for a hidden will or a secret journal. And while he's there, Nia asked. We won't be, Amara replied. But you'll have someone leave a message for Orion. A message only he would understand. A janitor's message. The news report was subtle, buried in the business section online. But Orion, who now spent his days in the public library, caught it. Lysander legal team files motion to unseal Founder's study. It was a signal. He understood immediately. The study was a time capsule. A place of memory and power. It was another place beneath the current company, a place of forgotten things. It was a message for him. That night, Naya's operative, a former private investigator, left a simple janitor's wet floor sign just inside the service door to the 39th floor, a door he knew Orion would check. Taped to the back was a single key and an address. The rendezvous was at a small, anonymous warehouse Nia had rented. When Orion arrived, his heart pounding, Nia was there. And so was Amara. Her ankle was bare. Nia filed an emergency motion for an off-site client strategy session, Amara explained, her voice quiet. It bought me 3 hours of freedom. She looked at him, truly looked at him. For the first time, the arrogance was gone, replaced by a deep, weary gratitude. You were right. And I was a fool. Thank you, Orion. Is my daughter safe? Was all he could ask. Yes, Naya interjected. I had my investigator pick her up from your neighbor this afternoon. She's at a safe house with a retired police officer. She thinks she's on a surprise vacation. She's fine. Orion felt a wave of relief so profound his knees went weak. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the lead-lined box. This is it. Naya took it as if it were a holy relic. Her forensics expert was already set up in the back. An hour later, he emerged, holding 2 reports. The disk contains the complete, successful data set for the Corazonin treatment, he announced, And the only usable prints I could lift from the disk itself belonged to one person, Roland Lysander. It was over. The truth was finally real, tangible, and undeniable. With federal agents on their way, armed with Nia's evidence and a new warrant, Amara made one last request. "I need to see him." The meeting took place in the boardroom where her life had been dismantled. Roland was brought in, his face a mixture of confusion and rage. He saw Amara, and his expression curdled. "What is this? You think you can intimidate me?" "It's over, Roland," Amara said, her voice devoid of anger, filled only with a vast, aching sadness. She walked closer to him. "I know what Father did to you. I know how he pitted us against each other, how he praised me and belittled you. That was his sin, not yours. And for all the pain that caused you, for the part of you that grew to hate me, I forgive you." Roland's arrogant facade faltered, a flicker of the wounded boy showing through. "But this," she continued, her voice hardening as she gestured to the invisible lives he had endangered. "This I can never forgive. You put innocent people at risk. You corrupted my life's work. You became the very thing he was." She took a final step toward him, her voice a near whisper. "Children should not have to pay for the sins of their fathers." As if on cue, the boardroom doors opened and the agents entered. Roland's face collapsed as he finally understood. He had been outmaneuvered. Weeks later, the city was bathed in the bright, hopeful light of a new day. A gleaming red Ferrari, a color as bold and defiant as its owner, pulled up to the curb in front of Orion Bell's small apartment building. The power was back on. Amara stepped out, not in a severe business suit, but in jeans and a simple sweater. She looked lighter. She looked free. Orion and Leora met her on the sidewalk. "I can never truly repay you," Amara said to Orion, her voice thick with emotion. She then knelt down to Leora's level. "Your father is a hero, Leora. He's the bravest man I've ever met." She smiled. "And because of him, you will never have to worry about school again. Your education, all the way through whatever university you choose, is taken care of." "For life." Leora's eyes went wide. Orion felt a lump form in his throat. "And that's not all," Amara said, standing up and looking at Orion. "I'm dissolving the charitable wing of my company. It was always just for PR. I'm starting a new, real foundation. It will provide legal aid and financial support to families, to whistleblowers, to people like you who get caught in the crossfire of the powerful." She handed him a thick portfolio. On the cover, in elegant script, were the words, "The Leora Bell Foundation." "I want you to run it," she said. "Your integrity, your strength. That's what this world needs. No more cleaning up messes, Orion. It's time for you to start building things." Orion was speechless. He looked from the portfolio to his daughter, then back to the woman who had, in the strangest of ways, become his responsibility, and then his ally. He saw not a CEO, but a survivor. Leora, who had been quiet through it all, finally spoke. "Does this mean my dad doesn't have to work at night anymore?" Amara's smile was genuine, and it transformed her face. "That's right," she said softly. "Your dad's work is just beginning, and from now on, he only works in the light." The three of them stood on the sidewalk under the warm sun, a small, unlikely family, forged in a crucible of betrayal and truth. The invisible man, the broken queen, and the little girl who was the brightest star in their sky. Together they turned away from the gleaming car and the shadows of the past, and walked toward a future they would build themselves. "Before you go, I just wanted to say thank you. Genuinely. In a world that's so full of noise and distraction, the fact that you chose to spend this time here with this story, well, that's not something I ever take for granted. It's a privilege to share these narratives. If any part of this one happened to stick with you, I'd genuinely love to hear about it in the comments. No pressure at all, of course, but that feedback means everything. And if you'd like to help me keep the stories coming, a simple like and subscribe goes a much longer way than you might imagine. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for being here. Until next time.